Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Good evening, Maverick family and new viewers from all over the world. Many things to discuss tonight. A major escalation in the war in Ukraine. Russia has launched major attacks as a response to Ukrainian attacks, and now Ukraine is responding tonight with more attacks. We'll bring you up to date. And this is the biggest air attack on Ukraine, and now the biggest counter offensive or reaction or whatever you want to call it, probably since the beginning of the conflict. What else is going on tonight? They are really ramping things up against Donald Trump. You're seeing it on multiple fronts. Maine now taking Donald Trump off the ballot for the primary, following the lead from Colorado, where Trump has been off the ballot. Then yesterday, we're hearing he's back on the ballot technically until a Supreme Court ruling on what's going on in Colorado. This is lawfare on steroids. This is viewed by many as election interference. Donald Trump has come right out and is calling it election theft. The situation in the Middle East, Israel and Hamas, is also escalating. And the politics surrounding all of that is also something that definitely needs attention, with Vivek Ramaswamy coming out with a statement saying that the two-state solution is really just a myth. We'll play you his clip. We'll share his comments with you. And it really is, I think, the boldest statement that I've heard thus far from any presidential contender. Ramaswamy being brutally honest in his view on this. And it's strangely refreshing to hear his take on it. I have to say, it was surprising to hear him just come out and be so blunt. When you hear what he has to say, you'll understand, I think, why I'm reacting the way that I am. So yeah, we have Russia on this full offense, and we have also Joe Biden issuing a response to that. You can tell that he's getting agitated, just a little bit agitated, President Biden. And then we also have a comment tonight from General Keith Kellogg, who is saying things would be a whole lot different right now if Donald Trump was still in the White House. Also, we're hearing that there's a new New York Times poll out that says Trump is now viewed by the majority of Americans as the return to normalcy candidate. That's the way a lot of people view him. This after Joe Biden has had a few years now to stabilize the country, and that has not happened. We have actually just the opposite, don't we? Oh, yes, we do. The country has never been more unstable, except maybe during the Civil War. And even then, I'm not so sure. because I think we're heading down that path anyway. We also have a clip from Sheena Bellows, Secretary of State, and talking about the decision to keep Trump off the ballot. So we'll bring you up to date with that. And actually, it's from we're going to share with you a Zoom type meeting or a C-SPAN broadcast with a staffer from that office talking about how the ACLU and the Southern Poverty Law Center are actively working to push ahead and promote these attempts to keep Trump off the ballot in various states. It's the ACLU and the Southern Poverty Law Center and some of the people, the leaders within those organizations who appear to be behind this effort. So we'll share those comments with you tonight, and then you can assess for yourself from that point. So there's all that, and we have more lined up as well. So don't go away, because we have a stacked show for you. We'll be back right after this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So tonight, what we're dealing with here is a major escalation in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. It really started to ramp up earlier this week with a report, well, not just a report, but an actual attack by Ukraine, striking the port of Feodosia in Crimea. There was a fire, a massive explosion. There was actually a ship that was there that was damaged. And this was earlier in the week. We know from reports on the ground there that 2 Ukrainian Su-24s armed with missiles struck the port. They fired and hit a large landing craft that was actively firing, and the ship was apparently sunk. Not quite clear on that, but it may not have actually gone down, but it was certainly hit and damaged. There was at least one person killed, 2 others injured in that attack, 6 buildings damaged, a lot of broken windows. The roads and other infrastructure there intact enough that transportation has not been, affected that much. But that ship was definitely damaged. During the anti-aircraft battle, 2 Ukrainian Su-24s that were launching missiles were destroyed by Russian air defense systems. That information coming from the Russian Ministry of Defense. And we have video that we can share with you right now from that event earlier this week. And I play this first because it's a prelude. It was a prelude to everything that has been unfolding over the last, let's say 24 to 48 hours, 24 in the most major way. Let me show you the attack in Crimea from earlier this week, first of all. So we were able to source that from the internet. Not widely seen, that particular footage. But it didn't stop there. Not by a long shot. So what we've seen since then is a major attack by Russia on Ukraine. In response, largely to what Ukraine unleashed. And so this is a major turn of events, indicating that Russia is still, and I think, in a dominant position. It was a staggering assault on Ukrainian soil, a barrage of 122 missiles and 36 drones targeted various locations, resulting in some loss of life. As of now, at least 30 civilians have been confirmed dead. Over 144 people sustaining injuries. The sheer magnitude of the onslaught, spanning approximately 18 hours, has certainly left a mark on Ukraine. And what is left in the wake of this is, a lot of broken glass, twisted metal. As I say, some casualties, plumes of smoke in the sky. Ukrainian Air Force officials still putting up a brave front. They claim to have intercepted the majority of the incoming missiles and drones, but the toll in terms of damage to infrastructure and collateral damage is undeniable. As I was saying earlier this weekend, have been saying for at least 2 weeks now, as we've watched troops being repositioned, Russian troops being repositioned, and then Ukrainian troops taking up, and I would say even retreating and then fortifying defensive positions. As I indicated, even just over 2 weeks ago, and since then, it looks to me like Russia is in the dominant position and could be finally poised to take additional territory, maybe even take the whole thing if they wanted to. I just don't think Vladimir Putin is interested in occupying the entire country. But if strategically that is what needs to be done to bring this thing to an end, I think Russia may actually be in a position to start working on getting that done. This is the biggest development in the war in terms of escalation activity and change in, I guess, claimed territory since last October, probably last October. So the Russian assault was described by Ukrainian Air Force commanders as the most massive aerial attack since the full-scale invasion or special military operation launch, depending on how you look at it, since February of 2022. And it goes on. And now, as a result of that, Ukraine has been hitting back. We are getting right now reports of additional attacks against Russia being launched by Ukraine. We have some video to share with you as well. But before we get to that footage, I want to share with you the statement that has been issued by Joe Biden in response to the Russian attacks overnight. Here's Joe Biden's statement. It says, this from Joe Biden's desk, overnight, Russia launched its largest aerial assault on Ukraine since the war began. This massive bombardment used drones and missiles, including missiles with hypersonic capability to strike cities and civilian infrastructure all across Ukraine. Strikes reportedly hit a maternity hospital, a shopping mall, and residential areas, killing innocent people and injuring dozens more. It is a stark reminder, Biden says here, to the world that after nearly 2 years of this devastating war, Putin's objective remains unchanged. He seeks to obliterate Ukraine and subjugate its people. He must be stopped, says Joe Biden. In the face of this brutal attack, he goes on, Ukraine deployed the air defense systems that the United States and our allies and partners have delivered to Ukraine over this past year to successfully intercept and destroy many of the missiles and drones. The American people can be proud of the lives we have helped to save and the support we have given Ukraine as it defends its people, its freedom, and its independence. But unless Congress takes urgent action in the new year, we will not be able to continue sending the weapons and vital air defense systems Ukraine needs to protect its people. Congress must step up and act without any further delay. The stakes of this fight extend far beyond Ukraine. They affect the entirety of the NATO alliance, the security of Europe, and the future of the transatlantic relationship. Putin has not just attempted to destroy Ukraine, he has threatened some of our NATO allies as well. When dictators and autocrats are allowed to run roughshod in Europe, the risk rises that the United States gets pulled in directly. And the consequences reverberate around the world. That's why the United States has rallied a coalition of more than 50 countries to support the defense of Ukraine. We cannot let our allies and partners down. We cannot let Ukraine down. History will judge harshly those who fail to answer freedom's call. That from the desk of the President of the United States, Joe Biden. Additional reports coming out within the last day that a peace deal was within reach back in April between Ukraine and Russia. Had it not been for the intervention of the UK and the United States, telling Zelensky no. And these reports allege that there was essentially influence exerted with money and arms. And since things are really ramping up, as we've seen with that footage we just showed you earlier this weekend, now tonight, we are seeing new footage rolling in with now more attacks on Russia by Ukraine. Let me share what we have been able to find for you and what has been sent to us this evening. So this footage is from the Russian city of Belgorod, which is apparently taking one heck of a beating. Here's what it looks like in the dark. Yes, and having to live under that, I guess more accurately, trying to survive that, has got to be terrifying for people. Ukraine unleashing its own hellfire even as we speak. And we are seeing additional reports of drones striking Bryansk, Russia tonight. Apparently, this attack was directed at a factory that produces electronics and radio equipment. And let me share this with you. And this is what it looks like there.
Долетел.
You see the flash, the explosions.
Долетел.
So that from the distance, and the conflict there continues, and we will continue to follow this story and update you as we get more information, possibly during this broadcast, as things are said to us, or as things pop up in our feeds. So there's more to come on that front for sure. So let's take a quick break here. I'm going to regroup and get our next series of clips lined up so that we can continue with this newscast and analysis right here on the Maverick News Channel.
Hello, world. Are you awake? Uniting humankind by liberating millions of minds at a time. Maverick News. The world is watching.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now, at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program. For your mind.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
And continuing our coverage of the conflict in Ukraine, we have this footage as well of a Russian missile hitting a high rise in Kiev, or Kyiv, depending on how you view Ukraine, which way you choose to pronounce it. And here's what that looks like.
Я себе, ебать, нихуя себе. Я себе.
Interesting. Massive explosion. And yet it didn't come tumbling down, even with a missile strike. Still standing. Isn't that interesting? The United States is still standing as a country tonight. But it seems not everybody is happy about that. Within the last day, we've seen more protests, more pro-Palestinian protests, more anti-Israel protests. Most notable, I think, is probably this protest that took place at, of all places, the World Trade Center. This has touched a nerve with many people. Pro-Palestinian protesters protesting on what many would consider to be sacred ground, considering the lives that were lost on 9/11. But here it is. Here's what some of that looked like from the past 24 hours in New York City. Well, the situation in the Middle East is I don't know what to tell you other than it's more volatile than ever. And there does not appear to be a solution in sight. That being said, Vivek Ramaswamy, presidential hopeful, rival to former President Trump for the nomination, although you might say he's sort of a Trump ally because he's supporting Trump and calling foul on these attempts to keep him off the ballot in some states, including Maine now. But Ramaswamy has come out with what I can only say is one of the most controversial statements on the conflict, and I would say one of the most honest assessments thus far. And when I say honest, I mean, I think he is speaking his mind without fear. He is speaking from a position of geopolitical creativity. And I haven't analyzed what he has said in depth enough to really have a fully formed opinion on his opinion. But I have to say, it's refreshing to hear someone speaking boldly. And I think even hearing someone say something that is different than what is just being echoed over and over and over again, but is not actually getting us anywhere. Oh, we need a two-state solution. Ramaswamy says a two-state solution is, in his view, a myth. A myth. Let me play you his clip. This surprised me. I was not aware that he had taken this kind of position, but it's just straight up. There's no dancing around this. Listen to what he says here. This coming from Forbes.
My view is that now is the moment for Israel to return to its founding premise. The Jewish state has an absolute right to exist. A divine gift, gifted to a divine nation, charged with a divine purpose. Israel has an absolute and unequivocal right and responsibility to defend itself to the fullest, applying the only language that its adversaries understand, the language of force. So what would David Ben-Gurion say today? He would say, don't depend on anybody else's fleeting sympathies or permission to do it. If Israel wants to destroy Hamas, Israel should go ahead and destroy Hamas. I'm just getting started. If Israel wants to destroy Hezbollah, Israel should go ahead and destroy Hezbollah. If Israel and Mossad want to pull off Munich 2.0 and take out every last leader of Hamas, wherever they may be hiding, from Doha to Dresden, host a red wedding at the Four Seasons in Qatar, the next time Haniyeh and Mashal show up, they should go ahead and do it. If Israel wants to, at long last, abandon the myth of a two-state solution, Israel should go ahead and abandon a two-state solution. The rest of the Arab world can absorb Palestinians just as the Jews absorbed their people out of 22 countries they were kicked out of since 1948. The Islamic world cannot continue to condone the slaughtering of Jews while continuing to disown the Palestinians. That is the hard truth, that neither member of either political party is willing to speak out loud to the Arab world. I will. But these are decisions for Israel to make. America. I am not running for president of Israel. I am running for president of the United States. And just as it is time for Israel to return to its founding premise, it is time for us here in the U.S. to return to ours.
You know, the rhetoric that I've been hearing from the pro-Palestinian side has escalated to the point where some people are coming right out and saying the United States does not have a right to exist. That the Western countries do not have a right to exist. Colonialism. Israel does not have a right to exist. These are actual words that people are saying. So much for a two-state solution. Dangerous times. Not sure where that leaves us exactly, but last night we ran clips from General Michael Flynn saying that someone on the Israeli side needs to be held accountable for the October 7th attack because the security was breached, which resulted or allowed the Hamas attackers, terrorists, to enter and kill over 1,200 people, and then say that Arab countries don't want to take the Palestinians who are being displaced by Israel's ground assault in Gaza because, according to General Flynn, any country that takes those Palestinians in will be taking in extremists, terrorists. He didn't use those words. He said they will be getting the same problems in their countries that they have right now, that Israel has. So that's why nobody wants to take them in. But sounding the alarm, saying that Netanyahu wants the West to absorb those Palestinian refugees. We have a Palestinian refugee crisis on our hands, folks, as the death toll in Gaza continues to rise. But keep in mind that Hamas still has hostages in custody, and we have been told, and it has been stated, that to end the conflict, all that has to happen is for Hamas to lay down its weapons and release the hostages, and the hostilities can come to an end. Believe it, don't believe it. That's what was said. Neither side trusts the other. And the tragedy continues to evolve, develop. President of Egypt coming right out and saying Egypt doesn't want the Palestinians. So even though Ramaswamy is now saying that Arab countries should be absorbing these Palestinian refugees, it is very apparent that these Arab countries don't want them. And what are we seeing here in the West? Well, I know here in Canada, the Canadian government is already poised, ready to take more Palestinian immigrants in response to this. We've heard maybe as many as 500,000. We'll see if that happens. But don't be surprised if it does. As a result, Canadian immigration levels could rise this year to well over 1 million. I'm predicting that they will take many of these people from Palestine, and I think that overall immigration record levels could rise to a record 1.4 to 1.5 million people in Canada, a country with less than 40 million people in total. The fabric of Canada is changing. The demographics of Western countries changing because of all this immigration. Now, all that being said about Netanyahu, I also find it interesting that these quotes being attributed to him about absorbing Palestinian refugees are just quotes. I have not seen yet a clip of him actually saying that in the meeting where he is purported to have said that. I am reading various accounts of that, and I think honestly that what he said is being used opportunistically and maybe with some liberties being taken with the context. Not that it's being taken entirely out of context, if indeed he actually said it. But based on some of the reports that I'm seeing, it is being used as an extension of this narrative that suggests Israel let, or maybe even choreographed, the attack on October 7th so that Israel gets the blame for the attack on its own people. And I'm not buying into that. We hear too much of that rhetoric. It's always the United States and Israel being blamed for anything bad that happens to itself. It's always America doing it to itself, when clearly, quite often, it isn't. And it has escalated to the point where this kind of double reverse logic, negative narrative, it's just gotten to the point where now people are cheerleading for people who want to kill them. It's just bizarre. When I'm seeing that happen, it's very clear to me that people are being subjected to unprecedented levels of propaganda and information warfare, to the point where they basically want to commit political suicide, or maybe even cultural suicide, or maybe even just suicide in some cases, honestly. It defies logic. That being said, here's the president of Egypt saying, yeah, we're not going to take them. And if he doesn't want them, who does? And should they come to North America? Should they come to Canada? Should they come to the United States? Listen to what he has to say, and then think it over a little bit here. He says they can send them back to, and I'll read along with this to help keep this understandable, not just for people viewing on our video feed, but also on our podcast as well. Send them back to Gaza if you want, located. Operation might take years. It remains vague, and terrorists still haven't been defeated. We haven't finished the task yet. Egypt can't bear the consequences of this conflict and turn Sinai into a base for launching terrorist attacks against Israel, and we in Egypt would be held responsible, and the peace we've worked so hard to achieve would swiftly dissipate in the name of resolving the Palestinian cause. So you see what he's saying? If they send the Palestinians there, he expects that they will continue to work against Israel, even from then within Egypt, and because they're within Egyptian borders. If they were to escalate things or conduct the same kind of activities, Egypt would then be held responsible. And what are we seeing in the streets? We're seeing more and more protests. We are seeing even protests at the World Trade Center, and even outright calls for the destruction of America from people living in America, who technically then would be American citizens. You know, for the survival of a nation, that might end up being a bit of a problem in the end. Just saying. Just saying. Might want to think it over a little bit while I run this, and we'll come back on the other side and we'll talk more about Trump.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
And here's General Keith Kellogg saying that if Trump were still in office, all this conflict that we're seeing in Ukraine, and I'm thinking also in the Middle East, probably would not be happening. Interesting comments right here.
7 October. They've totally misread the situation, and it puts all of our young men and women at risk. They know they're basically targets sitting on the ground. We haven't responded in a way that should be disproportional and making those hard calls. Kaylee, you and I have sat side by side in the Situation Room when a lot of those hard decisions were made. We know how hard they are, but you have to make them. Donald Trump made them. He was very effective at it, and then we need to do that again.
General Kellogg, just a few moments here, but would the world look a little different if former President Trump was current President Trump?
Oh, 100%. You wouldn't have had what happened in Ukraine. You wouldn't have what happened in the Middle East. We would have solved that problem easily with the Abraham Accords, and everybody in the world knows it.
With Kayleigh McEnany on Fox News. And Trump under serious pressure here tonight, still ongoing, this lawfare. The latest in this constitutional drama is echoing through the hallowed halls of American democracy tonight. In a twist of fate, 2 states now, Maine and Colorado, have declared Donald Trump ineligible to once again ascend to the presidency. The repercussions of this decision are poised to dance upon the grand stage of the U.S. Supreme Court, where the justices may find themselves entangled in a legal and political quagmire they'd likely prefer to avoid. Further complicating things here is that yesterday we reported that in Colorado, Secretary of State indicated Trump will actually remain on the ballot, technically, but they're trying to expedite a ruling from the Supreme Court, federally, to determine if Trump will actually end up being on the ballot. So he's technically still on the ballot, but not on the ballot in Maine, possibly still not on the ballot in Colorado if the ruling comes back against Trump. Trump's campaign, undeterred by last week's ruling from the Colorado Supreme Court, is set to mount an immediate appeal following Thursday's decision by Maine's top election official. Both courts cite the 14th Amendment, invoking its formidable powers to disqualify Trump due to his alleged role in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Despite being on the ballot for next year's GOP presidential primary in both states, a temporary pause has been granted to allow the higher echelons of the judiciary to intervene. Secretary of State Sheena Bellows of Maine, a Democrat, expressed her preference for U.S. Supreme Court guidance on this unprecedented constitutional question, acknowledging the weight of the decision. She says she was duty bound to make under Maine law. Maine's election law, a unique outlier, permits any registered voter to challenge a candidate's eligibility, requiring a public hearing and a swift decision. In this case, 3 voters challenged Trump, prompting a hearing last week and a decision deadline by the end of this week. Bellows, cognizant of the national maelstrom her decision has ignited, recognizes the historical gravity. She notes that no Secretary of State has previously denied a presidential candidate ballot access under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, highlighting the exceptional circumstances surrounding Trump's alleged engagement in insurrection, their word. The legal battle now shifts to the Maine Superior Court, where Trump's campaign plans to appeal Bellow's decision. The court is mandated to render a decision by January 17th, with potential avenues for further appeals to the Maine Supreme Judicial Court or the U.S. Supreme Court. In a landscape marked by legal inconsistency, with courts in other states affirming Trump's right to be on the ballot, the call for a broad U.S. Supreme Court ruling addressing the 14th Amendment question becomes increasingly urgent. Michael Waldman of the Brennan Center for Justice emphasizes the need for a national decision to prevent chaos at the polls. This case presents a complex tapestry of legal questions, including the factual inquiry into whether Trump engaged in insurrection on January 6th. He has not been convicted of that. As the wheels of justice turn, the eyes of the nation are fixed on the Supreme Court, which in moments of historical significance has proven its ability to rule swiftly and sometimes to make a choice where they do not deal with particular cases. The repercussions of Secretary Bellow's decision have drawn both condemnation and applause, with Republicans like Senator Susan Collins criticizing the interference of a Secretary of State appointed by the legislature. Meanwhile, a Maine Republican lawmaker contemplates an improbable impeachment effort against Bellows. Amidst the political cacophony, voices within the Democratic Party diverge. Representative Jared Golden, who voted to impeach Trump, disagrees with Bellows' decision, arguing that Trump should remain on the ballot until found guilty of insurrection. Representative Dean Phillips from Minnesota goes further, condemning efforts to suppress candidates through the legal system. So as this drama unfolds, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, CREW, as it's known, applauds Bellow's decision while acknowledging the ultimate authority of the U.S. Supreme Court. In a strategic move, CREW formally urges the top court to expedite the Colorado case, seeking a decision by February to impact upcoming Republican presidential primaries. So stay tuned, folks. America is on the cusp of perhaps the most consequential, certainly the most dramatic election in U.S. history, as this constitutional saga hurtles towards the highest court in the land. The echoes of history reverberate, and the fate of Donald Trump's political future truly does hang in the balance. So too does the future of the United States itself.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
And the PR baffle-gab, the information warfare continues to escalate as well over on ABC News, they have some former Trump administration officials who were there only for a short time when Trump was in power. And then they ended up resigning. They're sounding the alarm, saying that if Trump returns to the White House, it could be the end of democracy as we know it in the United States. 3 women who served in the Trump White House are sounding this alarm. Alyssa Faith Griffin, Cassidy Hutchinson, and Sarah Matthews, in an interview with ABC News chief Washington correspondents and This Week co-anchor Jonathan Karl, said that Trump is a threat to democracy. Griffin, Hutchison, and Matthews all cooperated with the House January 6th committee investigation into Trump following the 2020 election. And I have a clip from that interview here. And man, you want to talk about politics? This is politics. This is serious politics. But this is anti-Trump propaganda for sure coming from ABC. Let's let it roll.
In your mind, if Donald Trump became president again, what would a second Trump term look like?
Fundamentally, a second Trump term could mean the end of American democracy as we know it. And I don't say that lightly. We all witnessed him trying to steal a democratic election before and going to historic and unconstitutional lengths to do so. And that just shows that he's willing to basically break every barrier to get into power and to stay into power. But also, I'm very concerned about what the term would actually look like.
We don't need to speculate what a second Trump term would look like because we already saw it play out. To this day, he still doubles down on the fact that he thinks that the election was stolen and fraudulent. And then his rhetoric has just gotten increasingly erratic. I mean, he has literally called for things like doing away with parts of the Constitution, wanting to weaponize the DOJ to enact revenge on his political enemies.
The fact that he feels that he needs to lean into being a dictator alone shows that he is a weak and feeble man who has no sense of character and integrity and has no sense of leadership.
You know, when I think back, when Trump was president, there were times when he could have used a very heavy hand to restore public order. At times, I wondered why he didn't. Remember when they were trying to burn down the church in Washington, D.C.? And then he went and walked across the street to the church and held up the Bible and made that statement. And there were riots going on in Washington. You know, when I look back at times like that, when I look back at the riots in various cities across the United States, the summer of love, Trump could have done a lot more. He could have been very heavy-handed, but he always deferred to governors. He was very careful and measured in his response. Those were not the actions, in my opinion, of a dictator. Those are the actions of someone who is giving serious thought to the use of any kind of force against anyone who is an American citizen, using force against American citizens, even if those citizens are opposed to you as the president. Very measured. Should also point out that during J6, if you recall, he also offered to bring in reinforcements to help police. And it was Nancy Pelosi, who said no. So you can assess any way you want, but in my assessment, those are not the actions of a dictator. Now, he did facilitate an accelerated, expedited rollout of the vaccines, but also indicated all through the pandemic that he would prefer for people to have freedom of choice when it comes to these matters. Now, did not take a heavy hand in that regard to ensure that people did have that freedom. Again, he deferred to governors, to people at the state level to make a lot of these decisions. And I would say that that in itself was, in that particular case, a mistake, but also not indicative of a dictator's actions. So these claims from these women on ABC saying that Trump was and would be a dictator, I don't think they're fair. I don't think they're accurate at all. And in addition to that, you really need to look at who these women are and what they really stand for. The one lady there, she is currently a co-host on that ABC television show, The View, which is an anti-Trump cheerleading squad, really, at the end of the day. Even when they bring conservatives on, they're so often anti-Trump. So that is pure propaganda, in my estimation. So what's Trump going to be doing? I don't know. This thing in Maine, just another serious situation for the former president. And, it really comes down to that, this question, right? Who do you believe when it comes to the question of election integrity? And so, depending on which way you answer that question, that determines largely how you view this current situation, doesn't it? So who's the real patriot? Who's really pro-America? When you go back and look at that question, and you come up with whatever answer you come up with, it's easy to see why people are so polarized on that issue and on Donald Trump himself.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
As I was promising, we are keeping a close eye on the developments in both Ukraine and in the Middle East. And we are now seeing that there was an airstrike inside Lebanon now. This one launched against what is reported to be a site that was used as a launch site by Hezbollah to launch attacks against Israel. And here's what that strike looked like just a short time ago. More escalation in this conflict, now directly into Lebanon. Things are changing rapidly over there. It shows how quickly everything can change when it comes to war. And just when one side thinks they've gained ground, the other side strikes back. Very scary stuff. When you look back at everything that has happened over the past year, we are closer to an actual thermonuclear exchange than at any time in human history. A real nuclear war. This situation in the Middle East is really dangerous because it is spilling over now into other countries. We are seeing these ongoing attacks on ships in the Red Sea, merchant vessels now being defended by the United States and allied countries, including Canada. If this continues, folks, we're going to be into a full-blown, very easily into a full-blown kinetic Third World War. We're in a Third World War right now, but it's unconventional. It could easily turn into a global shooting war. Let's pray that it doesn't. Tomorrow we will take a look back at 2023. We'll review all of the things that have developed over the past year that have taken us to this point. The most dangerous place we've ever been as a species. A point of potential self-extermination. And I don't say it lightly. We've been a frog in a pot of boiling water, and they've been turning up the heat slowly over time. We've been allowing it to happen. Although we all sort of feel so powerless, don't we? And with all that being said, we also see politics changing domestically, don't we? And the demographics and mass immigration, and it's putting pressure on all of our infrastructure here, all of our services, including health care. And as a result, a lot of people are not getting the care that they really need. Tonight, we're seeing in Canada, which is held up as an example of what healthcare is supposed to be. Those who believe or yearn for some sort of free, socialized healthcare system point to Canada, and Canada sells itself, or at least the Canadian government and bureaucrats do, around the world as the best healthcare system in the world. And it is simply not true. The system is under immense stress, huge stress. And in British Columbia today, a BC man says his insurance provider has decided to cancel his and his wife's coverage because they failed to disclose a visit to the emergency room to the insurance company nearly 3 years before he was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. This gentleman's name is Toby Cleary. He says He says he's been sort of dropped off the side of a cliff, in his words. And he has spent the last few years receiving chemotherapy treatment at Abbotsford Regional Hospital and Cancer Center. Last September, Cleary and his wife, Danielle, applied for insurance through Manulife. He says the plan included critical illness, disability, and life insurance. Then, on January 5th of last year, Cleary was diagnosed with colon cancer. So this couple decided it was the right time to access the critical illness portion of the package, which provides a lump sum payment if either one were to be diagnosed with an illness covered by the policy, such as cancer. So they submitted their claim, and then they were told they were supposed to give the insurance company access to 10 years of medical records. 6 months later, they received a response from Manulife saying the entire insurance policy was going to be terminated because Cleary's failure to disclose to Manulife that emergency room visit back in 2019 meant that his disclosure was not complete. So according to this letter, Manulife noted the visit included rectal bleeding, no diagnosis, and a referral for a colonoscopy. And the letter went on to state that under the insurance agreement, Cleary signed declaration on March 2nd of 2020, confirming that since the application date of September 17, 2019, he had not had any illness, disorder, injury, operation, or treatment, had not consulted, been examined or treated by a healthcare professional, or being advised to or have a medical appointment or consultation with a healthcare professional that has not yet taken place. So in other words, he signed something, said that he hadn't been assessed for anything like that, but had been to a hospital and did receive an assessment, and left that off the application for insurance. And so they're saying that violated the terms of the agreement, and therefore they're not going to give him any insurance coverage. But Cleary is saying that it was a minor thing, never thought much about it because it would have been so long ago. It was something that was overlooked during the application process, and even though there was rectal bleeding, he was told it was probably due to a hemorrhoid. Now, because of that, it looks like he's not going to have the coverage that he needs moving forward from this private insurance company, which just shows you, honestly, folks, that here's a picture of Mr. Cleary, by the way. It just goes to show you that in Canada, there are limits to how much free healthcare people are provided with. In addition to that, as I've pointed out many times on this program, the great Canadian healthcare system is under such stress, especially funding stress, and there is so much inefficiency in the system that the government has just really resorted to rationing of care in order to rein in costs. Here's a young lady who is not happy at all with the state of care that she is receiving. Because of the extremely long wait times for tests and for care, and the extremely short supply of qualified specialists. Listen to this.
About Canada that no one's really talking about outside of Canada. And like, I know that some people in America are aware of this, right? But anyone talks about Canada, they go, oh, healthcare is free, blah, blah, blah. And I do know that some people are aware, like, well, you do have to wait longer, you know. Ooh, understatement of the century. Okay. In Canada, you'll probably die first before you get the help you need. Like, you'll literally, and I'm not joking, that's not me being dramatic. There are doctors that know that if they're handing out certain diagnoses, totally treatable if you do it in time, but they know they're not going to be able to see a specialist in that time. So they just know these people are going to die because they cannot get help. I have been dealing with literally pain in my liver. I can't see a doctor. Can't see a doctor. Doesn't matter what's going on. There just literally aren't enough physicians. It's not that they're picking and choosing and picking poorly. They literally just don't have physicians. There's nobody here. So you want to come here? You want to be like, oh, I want to get free healthcare. You'll probably die first. Okay. I've been on a wait list for a general practitioner, a GP, for 6 months. And you can't do anything here without a GP. I can't even go to the gynecologist for a routine exam. And I had precancerous tissue in my cervix, so I have to get checked twice a year. Can't even do that. I can't even do that. I even tried calling like the women's health center that we have here because, like, you know, that they're supposed to be helping people. And they're like, sorry, as of November, we will only be taking appointments through your GP. You need a referral to go see them. So here I am. I have gone to 2 walk-in clinics in the past week to try to get help. They're full. I call as soon as they open because they say, hey, don't come visit us. Call us. We only start answering phones at 8:30. Call us. We'll give you an appointment that day. I called as soon as 8:29, 8:30, called them. As soon as I got there, like, oh, we're full. So if you want to come here, I hope that you are the healthiest person ever and you've never had one single medical problem in your life. If you go to the ER, the only way you're probably going to get seen, you need to seize on the floor. No, seriously, you need to have a seizure. That's a real story that my cousin witnessed. You will not get help here. You won't. I'm literally considering moving back to the United States. You know how bad that is, where I'm considering moving back to the States? Because I'm like, look, if the only thing getting in my way of healthcare is actually just paying someone, I will take medical debt now. I will, because at least I will live. Are you joking me? Anyways,
it just shows you the grass ain't always greener on the other Canadian side.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
And while they ration your health care here in Canada, they also reach deeper and deeper into your pocket to take more and more through taxation. And that is what is going to happen in the new year. Come 2024, you're going to see hikes in payroll taxes, carbon taxes, alcohol taxes. Everybody's going to pay more. Higher payroll taxes because the mandatory Canada Pension Plan and employment insurance contributions will rise. That means if you make about, say, $73,200 or more, you're going to end up paying another $347 in payroll taxes. Even more if you make more. That means your tax bill will be well over $5,100. And this is why I really don't want employees anymore. The employer payroll tax is also increasing. See, that's what a lot of people don't understand or realize is that when an employer in this country hires someone, they not only have to pay you your wage, they have to pay a tax on paying you a wage. The federal government is imposing a new tax in the new year called CPP2, Canada Pension Plan 2. The original CCP, or CPP rather, Canada Pension Plan taxes your income up to 6%, up to $68,500. And the new Canada Pension Plan 2 expands that and then adds an additional income tax at 4% up to $73,200. Oh, it's so typically liberal and so typically Trudeau, isn't it? So this is all coming in the new year. Trudeau all the time saying he's working for the middle class, working to make life more affordable. Those are his words. And then he turns around and slaps that carbon tax on, and that's coming. So that means higher prices for gasoline, diesel, and home heating fuels. I shouldn't even laugh. But what else can you do while he's still in power? Ultimately, that results in higher prices across the board. It fuels inflation, this carbon tax, because it increases the cost of fuel for producing things, for transporting goods to market. The costs to trucking companies increases. Higher fuel prices translate into higher prices for everything. So if you slap a carbon tax on fuel, the fuel that's used to produce and transport and even preserve through things like refrigeration, things like food and other consumer goods, then everything's going to go up. So there's an estimate out there from the parliamentary budget officer that the carbon tax is going to cost the average Canadian family almost $1,000 more, at least $900 in the new year. Even after the federal government gives you what they say are rebates on the carbon tax, where Trudeau has essentially lied to people and told everyone that the carbon tax will actually put money in your pocket. What absurdity. We're going to tax you to give you more. And some people are actually buying that. But there's the parliamentary budget officer telling you just the opposite. The carbon tax ultimately, in the end, will cost you, as an average Canadian, about almost $1,000 more per year. All that coming in 2024. There's also that digital services tax that is being imposed on social media companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon. And those additional higher advertising costs are very likely to be passed on in terms of higher prices for all kinds of consumer goods again. Because they're not going to just absorb that 3%. They're going to pass it along as part of the price chain. Oh, yeah, and if you enjoy drinking this New Year's Eve, well, enjoy it while you can, because in 2024, alcohol is going to cost more. Thank you, Justin Trudeau. There's a federal alcohol tax hike that is expected to cost taxpayers about $100 million more in 2024. In fact, did you know that the cost of beer right now, about half of the price of beer, is because of taxation? And it's even higher when you look at wine and other alcoholic beverages, where the total price, the total cost of many of those beverages is made up of 65% tax in Canada. According to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, 51 national governments that provided tax relief during the pandemic, or I should say they identified 51 national governments that provided tax relief during the pandemic to ease the burdens of inflation. Those governments include more than half of the G7 and G20 countries and 2/3 of the countries in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. But here in Canada, no, we're getting the opposite. You are getting some tax relief from some provincial governments in places like Saskatchewan, where they are responding, and I think in Alberta as well, where they are responding to the federal tax hikes with tax breaks to help their people out there. But that's not a total solution. And in fact, that puts increased pressures on provincial budgets, and those funds are then not present for other services in those provinces. So it's the provincial government providing the relief, not the federal government. And provinces don't have the ability to print their own currency. They're at the mercy of the federal government as much as the citizens are in many respects when it comes to macroeconomic policies. So 2024 is going to be a tough one, or at least tougher than 2023 economically, I think. And in fact, it is in Alberta that the government promised to cut personal income taxes and also passed legislation requiring a vote before the government can increase income or business taxes. Manitoba's income tax cuts also could save taxpayers there about $2,000 in the coming year. And over in Quebec, well, they lowered their income tax rate on the first two income tax brackets. New Brunswick implemented income tax relief last year. And even in Prince Edward Island, the income tax rate has been cut to save the middle class, the average middle class taxpayer, about $200. But Trudeau, no, taking the opposite approach. He would prefer to increase taxes, then turn around, take that money, give some of it back in order to buy your vote, thinking that he's going to fool us all into thinking that he is philanthropic, generous, kind, and caring, because he's trying to buy us with our own money.
Maverick News. The world is watching. Exile. The Knights of Malta. Maverick News. Join us. The world is watching.
Okay, I'm back, and yeah, I think it's time to go to the phones. So let's do that, shall we? Let me get the number up on the screen here for you. We'll get things rocking and rolling here in a minute. Also, a reminder that if you'd like to support the channel, if you like what we do, you can donate at maverickdonations.com. That'll take you to the Give, Send, Go donation page. Or you can also donate at freedomreporters.com. That's where most people prefer to do it, freedomreporters.com. And please consider liking, sharing, subscribing. We're still in Facebook jail. I wished people a Merry Christmas on Messenger, and I'm still not allowed to use Messenger as a result. Prohibited. I can see messages coming in, but I'm not allowed to respond. So people, I guess, just continue to think I'm being rude. I'm not. I have no way to respond on Messenger. In some cases, I've responded by email to people whose email addresses that I have. If they messaged me, then I respond with an email back. So I've done that, but I can't respond on Messenger. Maybe tomorrow. I can't post on Facebook either. On a temporary ban. Still in Facebook jail. I'll wear it like a badge of honor. Wear it as a badge of honor. So, you know, the whole thing with Trump, just to go back to this before we go to the phones, it's clear that the politics is pretty dirty. And we're seeing some evidence and maybe even an inadvertent admission of guilt tonight from Sheena Bellows from Maine. Hang on a second here. Let me see if I can find you that clip. So yeah, here's Sheena Bellows. Really just talking about how, you know, she has decided that Trump can't be on the ballot, right? In Maine, Democrat. It seems that this push is coming from some people who are closely aligned with the American Civil Liberties Union and other political groups, including the Southern Poverty Law Center, Democrat aligned, I would say, neoliberal wokesters. And this is pretty much an admission in this broadcast that was run on C-SPAN with a bunch of these lefties pretty much admitting that it's these organizations or people from them, some of the leaders from some of these organizations, or people who have previously been involved with or at least have ties to them, that are trying to choreograph. It seems like they're trying to choreograph this anti-Trump lawfare being designed to keep them off ballots in various states. Let's run this clip, and you can assess for yourself. But some people are out there tonight saying that this is evidence of choreographed lawfare coming directly from these organizations and the people involved who they are characterizing as political activists, anti-Trumpers.
And Secretary Bellows, would love to hear about your thoughts on like our biggest threats facing our democracy at this point in time.
Well, what Secretary Griswold just said and named is something that was unimaginable 2 years ago or 10 years ago, and that is election sabotage. It is a crystal clear example of what's happening all across the country. So we need to organize to make sure we have better leaders in positions of power to fight back against that. Secretary Benson talked about voter suppression, and that's something that when we started our careers at the ACLU and Southern Poverty Law Center, fighting back about systematic, structural voter oppression, targeting specifically Black and brown voters. It's rooted in white supremacy. That is something we have to continue to do work on. And Secretary Merrill talked about the For the People Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. We must have federal standards all across the country. And then finally, just to echo my colleagues, this is rooted in a deliberate and organized campaign to discourage people from participating in our democracy. It is an attack on our very democracy itself, because when everyone participates, everything that we care about, social justice, climate justice, economic justice, we win. Those on the other side are trying to discourage people from participating. That's what this really is about. We have to fight back to protect our democracy, to protect everything.
That's such a good point.
On the surface, that sounds fantastic. But when you dig down deeper and really listen to what was really said, shouldn't the effort really be focused on election integrity, making sure one vote, one person, one vote, making sure that you're getting only people who are allowed to vote in voting, voter ID, paper ballots, if for no other reason than to address growing concerns about election integrity and the integrity of voting machines. If people are really that concerned about it, and it's undermining that the use of such machines is one of the main causes of voter skepticism and a loss of confidence in the system, then why not just return to the paper ballots? Just put people's minds at ease. When you really listen to what was said, they're all trying to work together, coordinate. So I understand why some people are viewing those comments in the way that they do as being an admission of choreographed lawfare aimed at President Trump. Let's run this brief promo, and when we come back, we will go to the phones.
We are Mavericks. We say no to the Trudeau and Biden New World Order. And to bugs. Because bugs are creepy and gross. And people should not eat bugs. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Hey, no! To bugs!
Okay, we're getting her cranked up. Here we go.
Join the conversation. Call 1-833-975-3733. That's 1-833-975. Free. Speak up. Speak out. Make your voice heard.